Hi, this is Byron Stripling from the Columbus Jazz Orchestra, and this is Offstage Live. Now, if you're like me, you know the Columbus Jazz Orchestra is delicious, nutritious, good, and good for you. And if you're like me, you're missing Dwight Adams and Bobby Everhart, Jim Powell. You're missing Linda Landis and Jim Masters, Ryan Hamilton and Pat Lewis. You're missing Byron Rooker, Michael Cox, Pete Mills, Chad Eby. You're missing Bob Breithaupt, Chris Berg, and the great Bobby Floyd. But not to worry, we are working very hard to bring you back the CJO by any means necessary. Now, our word for today goes out to our young people. I'm also thinking of all those young people that we serve with our educational programs under the leadership of the great Zach Compston. You can catch his Facebook live stream on Thursdays during the week. But our young people who are in high school and college preparing for finals and learning via remote computer, and we know that many of you will miss the opportunity to make that well-deserved walk during your own graduations. We at the Jazz Arts Group want to encourage you and let you know that all of your work has not been in vain. As Henry Wadsworth Longfellow said, the heights of great men reached and kept were not achieved by sudden flight, but they, while their companions slept, were toiling upward in the night. And that is to say, none of your work has been done in vain. We're reminded of the great Abraham Lincoln who said, I will study and prepare myself, and someday my chance will come. So we encourage you to keep studying and keep dreaming and working to create your best self. We need your talents. As the old Negro spiritual says, this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine, and we encourage you to let your little light shine. Ladies and gentlemen, like all arts organizations around the world, we've been deeply affected by the coronavirus crisis, and so I've got a request for you. Please go to jazzemergencyfund.com and make a 100% tax deductible gift to the Jazz Arts Group, where you can make this gift via credit card or you can get information on where to write a check. On the screen, you'll see the names, and they're scrolling right now, of the generous people who have already contributed to this campaign. With your gift, you are ensuring the future of jazz in Central Ohio. We want to thank those who have already contributed, including Kyle, George and Vanessa, Anne, as well as Jerry Jurgensen. And I've just given you first names here because I don't want to embarrass anybody, but that's Dennis and Anne, we already said, Anne and Tom, John and Patricia, Tom and Joan and Sandy, and so many others as you saw that list there. We want to remind you to dig deep and make a donation to support our continuing efforts to uplift this community through great jazz. You know, one writer noted that the most powerful thing in the world is the human soul on fire. And what we know is that jazz ignites that fire. So please help us light that fire. This community, indeed the world, needs the musical nourishment that we want to offer them. Anyone who's experienced the depth and the beauty of jazz, they know it evokes and it realizes the greatest form of hope. Jazz is the finest form of hope, and so join me, and together we will lead the charge in continuing the legacy of this great music. Also, join us this coming Tuesday, May 5th, for Giving Tuesday. Giving Tuesday is a movement meant to spark a day of international giving. It typically occurs after Thanksgiving, but in light of the coronavirus, it will take place Tuesday, May 5th. Join your friends, family, and neighbors for a day of giving. Go to givingtuesday.org to support our organization and others in our community. Finally, join me next week as we welcome the great renowned drummer, Jeff Hamilton. He will certainly have historic things to talk to us about, and he will also keep us laughing. Ladies and gentlemen, now for the big event today. He's a composer, arranger, conductor, producer, educator, and of course, an extraordinary bassist. With a Grammy win and 8 Grammy nominations, he has performed and arranged for artists like Diana Krall, Luther Vandross, Paul McCartney, John Pizzarelli, Gladys Knight, Queen Latifah, Charles Aznavour. I'm not done yet. Milt Jackson, Nina Simone, Regina Carter, Dee Bridgewater, Monty Alexander, Dr. John, Michael Bublé, Natalie Cole, George Benson. I'm not done yet. I'm just getting started. Carmen McRae, Barry Manilow, Henry Mancini, and for years he's had a close association with the great Quincy Jones. And that's just a few I'm mentioning right there. In 1969, at the prodigious age of 16, he enrolled in bassist Ray Brown's jazz class at the University of California, UCLA, is what they call it, UCLA, beginning a close relationship with him that lasted more than 3 decades. And after graduating from Indiana University's School of Music with a degree in bass performance, he toured with the great Monty Alexander Trio. Then he went on to work with the great Count Basie, and then he worked as principal bassist with the Amsterdam Philharmonic Orchestra in Amsterdam, the Netherlands. However you say that, I always say it wrong. He was also the bass instructor at the Royal Conservatory in The Hague, Holland. Upon his return to California, he co-founded the Clayton Hamilton Jazz Orchestra in 1986, and then he rekindled the Clayton Brothers Quintet at that time. Later on, he taught part-time bass at Cal State Long Beach, UCLA, and USC. And then in 1988, he joined the faculty of the University of Southern California Thornton School of Music, where he has taught since 2009. He is the past director of the Hollywood Bowl Jazz Festival, where he was leading that and did amazing, incredible things, performing for more than 10,000 people every weekend. An incredible thing. I got to witness that. Past director of the Lionel Hampton Jazz Festival. He's been the force behind the Centrum Jazz Festival in Washington State and the Vail Jazz Party in Vail, Colorado. I want to say his name, but I want you to hear him play first. Could we have a little bit of John Clayton there, Alexa? I just want to feel him right now. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I got to introduce him now. He is a man that I consider my mentor. He's a family man, which we'll talk about later. He's a gentleman. He's a mentor to so many people. And this is all bigger than who he is as a musician, which we'll have a chance to talk about. But as a man, I have the highest respect for the great John Clayton. And John, before you say one word, I want you to make sure your mute button is off. I have somebody that wants to say something to you. She wants to say just a little bit of something to you.
Lieve John.
Hoe gaat het, meisje?
Goed, en met jou?
Fantastisch, leuk om je te zien.
Ja, gezond?
Ja?
Werk? Ja, goed.
Ja, alles gaat goed.
I want to say hi to you.
Oh, great to see you. Oh, mwah.
Can you translate what you said? Because I never know what.
Yeah, I told her we were going to meet for a drink after this is over.
I want to see that virtual drink.
No, I'm going to be there.
You guys are going to be passing it through the camera there. Look, first of all, thank you. And we should let everybody know that was you with the Count Basie Orchestra. And can you just tell us what happened to that hair?
I've got it in a drawer here somewhere. I don't know what I think I gave it to my son.
And he turned it into dreads.
He turned it into dreads.
Since you said your son, I want you to do something quickly for us. You were talking to my wife in Dutch, and I just want to know how and why you learned Dutch, and I think I know that story. And then just quickly tell us about your two children before we get too far. And we're just tell us, just talk.
Yeah, it's funny. I think the audience really wants to know how your wife knows Dutch. What's that about? Right? Well, I know Dutch because when I moved to Holland to be with my then girlfriend, now wife, I kind of chanced on this audition for the Amsterdam Philharmonic position. So I took the audition, got the position, and especially since I was everybody spoke English, but especially since I was the principal bass player, I felt, you know what, I need to do something about this language. I can't force these people to speak English, even though they do. So I just started working on learning the language, driving from Utrecht to Amsterdam, which is about a 30-minute drive. I had my cassette course, and I would put that cassette in there, and I'd be driving along repeating all these phrases. I had no idea what the hell I was saying. I was just saying the words. And then I'd go home and look at the book and say, oh, that's what that means. But anyway, that's kind of how that got started, how that all happened.
And were your children born in California, or were they born
No.
in
Yes, my children were born in Holland. Both of them born at home, which was, with midwife, that's much more normal there. It's becoming really popular here as well, but in Holland, the midwifery is wonderful, and they have a really stringent training that they have to go through in order to be a midwife in Holland. Not that they don't here, but that was already set many years ago there. So my wife was really comfortable with having the kids at home. So we had them at home. And soon after Gerald, so I have Gina and Gerald. Soon after Gerald was born, we started looking at coming to the U.S. I didn't know if it was going to be New York or L.A. At that time, I wanted to be a film composer. And so therefore, it made sense to go to Los Angeles. And I had, family and contacts here in LA anyway, so that's how it all kind of happened.
Can you tell us about your kids? Because they've done, our kids will do whatever they want. Whatever they want is fine, as long
Yeah.
as, and I think you believe, as long as they're good people and good citizens and all that. Your children are certainly that. I do have great memories of being at the Hollywood Bowl when you would invite me to perform with you, and your son Gerald playing, like passing the football back there. And I didn't even know at that time if he cared that much about piano. I just remember seeing this cute kid, passing the football. He's done amazing things. And also your daughter Gina. Can you tell us a little bit about both of them?
Oh, sure. Gina's the oldest, and she's gone on to make the long story short. She finished school at Harvard Law School, moved from there to New York and lived in Harlem to help women with housing issues. And then eventually moved to California, Northern California, where she started an organization which still exists today. She moved to California after a few years up north, but the organization is to help women with incarcerated loved ones, dedicated to and named after my grandmother, her great-grandmother, who was this amazing black woman who, for some reason, had the smarts to get into real estate. So she had a couple of houses and did all these really crazy, wonderful, ahead of her time sort of things. And then when my mom also is phenomenal, amazing, pretty much single-handedly raising 7 children. I'm the oldest of 7. And so Gina was having a discussion with my mom, her grandmother, saying, how did her great-grandmother do it? And my mother said to Gina, well, honey, she had help. She had sisters. And that was the light bulb that went on that made Gina think, so her whole organization, which again is helping women with incarcerated loved ones, is about women helping women, women empowering women. So she's done this amazing thing, raised bucket loads of money, had a lot of support, all this stuff. So and recently she and her husband made us grandparents. So I'm now I get it. Finally, I've always just heard about, being a grandparent. Now I get it. It's amazing.
Wow.
So that's Gina. She's doing great things. Luckily, knock on wood, through this whole coronavirus situation, since they live a 3-minute drive from us, they bought a house 3 minutes away from us. Very smart of them, I must add. I basically do the cooking, and every night I'm there to bring them food, and we all eat together, and then I get to see the grandbaby, etc. So that's that. And Gerald, of course, he was in New York for many years, and a few years ago moved back to Los Angeles because he missed surfing. Would love to say he missed his mom and dad, but he missed surfing. So he moved back to LA. It's great to have him in the area. the corona situation has us doing the whole family, distancing sort of thing. So we don't get to hug anymore, but we do get to see each other, and we have a couple of at least one, hopefully two family dinners a
Mm-hmm.
week with with the whole distancing sort of thing. And
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, and Gerald has he embraced music. He was back there maybe throwing a ball behind the Hollywood Bowl and all that sort of thing. But so he was part of him was being a kid. He's still being a kid now that he can't surf anymore because they've closed the beaches. He's taken out his old skateboard. So that's his, rather than walk around the neighborhood, for exercise and stuff, he skateboards around the neighborhood. That's his
Fantastic.
thing, yeah. So both kids are doing great. Gerald's doing beautifully with his music, and I think he's actually working on some music for a film. So
Oh, cool.
we'll hear about that, I guess.
Well, you have amazing kids, I must say. And if you'll let me, I'd love to stay on family for just a second, and try to connect it to you. So you mentioned that your mother raised seven children. I got to meet your mother, I think it was in Texas.
Hmm.
And that was amazing. I think she must have been with one of your sisters or something at that time, or
Yeah.
something like that. It's amazing to me. And she must have thought I was crazy because I just told her how honored I was to meet her, because I know what she did and what she produced.
Hmm.
And I know who and what you are as a person. And it must have come from her. And so I'm interested in two things. Did you get your cooking thing from her? Because you and your brother Jeffrey can cook. If we had time, I'd tell how Jeffrey, your brother that plays sax, cooked for the whole Count Basie band one time and blew us all away with fried chicken and macaroni and cheese and
Oh
peach
yeah.
cobbler and everything. He even brought me to his apartment one time when we were on the road together and cooked the whole meal for me and my girlfriend at the time. Um, but there's that, and then the cooking thing, your mom being the person that could raise all these children at the same time. But there's something in you that I've learned, and I've always tried to model you, and you are a mentor to me. And we were getting ready to eat one time, and you said, "Well, I can't eat yet because I have to earn the right to eat. I have to go exercise." And you have this thing where you won't eat until you've done your exercise for the day. And I like made a note of that. And I've been doing that since we've been on quarantine here and just finished my walk a while ago.
Nice.
But where did that sense of discipline come from? And do you think that your good natured spirit and who you are as a person is from your mother or your siblings or a combination? Can you speak about that?
Sure. Praise be to my mom. She's as you have hinted at, pretty amazing. I'm the oldest of seven. It's all of our first names begin with the letter J, so it's John, Jeffrey, Janine, Joseph, Jerome, Jennifer, Joy. I always joke about it around our house. It was my mom going, ja, 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 ja. Boy, put that down. you know, that was our situation. But she's the one that, first of all, even to this day, she's very giggly, very, upbeat. Um, she never let us feel that we were poor. Every now and then, we point blank have to, ask the question, Mom, can I have such? She said, honey, we po. But there was always food on the dinner table. We always had clothes. We went through hard times like so many people have gone through. I had remember putting cut out pieces of cardboard in my shoes so that the hole wouldn't affect, my foot. I remember all that stuff. But she never let us feel our poverty and was always upbeat, very religious woman. We were in church every Sunday plus, and the cooking thing, even that came from my mom. So because my mom played piano and organ and conducted the church choirs, we heard music all the time. So that was, I'm sure, where that came from. But she also, when she finally got a really great job being a mail carrier for the U.S. Postal Service, she then had to work longer hours. So she would leave a note for me when I'd come home from school. We'd come home from school, then the note might say, in the refrigerator, there's chicken, it's already seasoned, turn the oven on to 350, put it in, 45 minutes, I'll be home, blah, 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 The next note might say further down the line, season the chicken that's in the refrigerator and whatever. And then eventually it morphed into fix dinner.
Right,
So
right.
she sort of allowed us to get into this little by little. And so yeah, all of us, thanks to her, have some kind of cooking skills.
Sure.
And that's, yeah, mom's great. She's
Yeah.
still hanging in there. She's now living in Atlanta instead of California, so that she can be watched by one of my youngest sister,
Yeah.
Joy. So mom's a bit frail, but still giggly and happy, moving slower but moving.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. There was a man in your life that really influenced you. We have a video of you performing with him. I wonder if Alexa could throw that one up just before we talk about him. But he was very special to you. Wow, that's pretty incredible. That's the great Ray Brown. And I just want you, I've heard stories that he helped you get a bass. I've heard stories that he helped you maybe get a recording date with Henry Mancini. What did this man mean to you and what did he do for you?
Oh gosh, where do I start? Yes, he did all of those things. When I was 16 years old, I was in high school and had fallen in love with playing in the jazz band, and my teacher saw that I was really serious in getting into it. So my teacher's the one who said, we have to get you a classical teacher. Got me a classical teacher. I also, around that time, after starting my classical lessons, heard this recording of Oscar Peterson with Ray Brown and Ed Thigpen, and blew my mind. Never heard the bass played like that. Went to my next classical lesson, said, have you ever heard of this gentleman named Ray Brown? He said, yes, he's a friend of mine. I'm shocked. He goes and takes a letter that he has from Ray Brown. It says, dear Mr. Siegel, would you please tell your students about a class I'm teaching at UCLA called Workshop in Jazz Bass? That was my last classical lesson with that guy. I saved $65 and I enrolled in this evening course for one semester. Even though I was in high school, it was an extension course, I could take it. And that just opened up my life. So after the course ended, Ray Brown, not only did he teach the class about jazz basics and bass basics that you really needed to know, he also introduced us to a lot of names that I'd never. Ray Brown is the one who played for that class. Names like Milt Hinton, Ron Carter, Paul Chambers, everybody, Slam Stewart, Israel Crosby, Scott LaFaro, the list. He played all these records for us and introduced us to these people by recordings. And then after the course ended, Ray allowed me to follow him around. And I did so, and I'd go to his recording sessions or his club gigs, and just watch and listen and try to figure things out. He really only gave me privately one, maybe two lessons one-on-one. People say, did you study with Ray Brown? And I'm reluctant to answer yes to that, because more than studying with him, I studied him.
Mm-hmm.
I watched and, imitated, and even when he wasn't telling me what to do, I was finding his recordings and learning what I could and playing along with him and all that stuff. So that's how that started. And then Ray Brown said, okay, you need to study classically again. And he got me a classical teacher. I was also playing electric bass at the time. He got me lessons with the great Carol Kay, who was this phenomenal electric bass player who was locked up in studios. And she knew, thanks to Ray Brown, about my financial situation, my family situation. So she charged me $5 a lesson. It was so big of her. And my classical teacher said, I know what's going on with you and money. Let's not worry about that. I'll just keep a tab, and when you are on better footing, you can pay me." And that's what happened. So, and then Ray Brown is the one who introduced me to Monty Alexander. Ray Brown's the one that introduced me to Count Basie, on and on and on, all these things. And then eventually he said one day, fast forward years later, after I'd played with the orchestra and come back to Los Angeles, one day he said, "Have you ever heard of this kid named Christian McBride?" And I said, "Yeah, he's a great player." He said, "Thinking about maybe putting a group together with you and him and maybe call it Super Bass." And that's how Super Bass was born. Ray Brown got us together, and no rehearsal. The rehearsal was, the day of the first gig that he booked. And we were all, to bring in 2 arrangements for the 3 of us, and we rehearsed them and then performed them, and that was the beginning of Super Bass in his hometown, Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that relationship with Ray Brown continued and grew, and losing him hit me harder than even losing my own father.
Yeah. Yeah. Special.
Yeah.
And I know he helped you get a bass at one point. And
Yes, he did. I forgot to mention that. When I was at Indiana University, he and my classical teacher at the time said, "Clayton is working too much. He's not practicing enough. We need to get him out of here." So they shipped me to Indiana.
Wow.
And they knew, especially my classical teacher knew the classical guy at Indiana University. I went there, and I still didn't have a bass. I borrowed a bass actually from who else? Ray Brown. So I had this borrowed Ray Brown bass, and then I met Jeff Hamilton at school, and for that first summer, we got a gig with the Tommy Dorsey Big Band led by Murray McEachern. So we started touring that summer, and I went into a store in Toronto while on tour with this band and played one note. And I looked at my girlfriend at the time and went, "Whoa." And I pointed at the bass. So I asked the guy, how much the bass cost. And he said, "Well, it's in for repair, and I think the guy is wanting to sell it. I think he's asking $1,000 for it." Now, this is 1972, 73. $1,000 for a student was like $10,000 or $20,000. I didn't have that kind of money.
Wow.
So anyway, Ray Brown, I called him. Who else? Ray Brown flew from LA to Toronto and paid for that bass without having heard it, and went back to LA, and I eventually paid him back. But that's the kind of, I always point out that's sort of the credo that we musicians live by. Somebody helped me, I'm going to help you, and you're going to help somebody else. And that's just the way we do it.
Yeah. Wow. Well, you were talking all this bass, and one of our fans and one of your fans in our audience is Cindy Huddle, and she says, "I love the trumpet, Byron, but the bass is really the instrument." So she is off my friend list now, but
She's on mine,
she's
which is
on.
more important. Yay, Cindy, thank you. Thanks for your good taste.
So Ray Brown tells you or introduces you to Count Basie. Tell us how that happened, and what's it like your first night playing with Count Basie? Were you nervous as heck? Because if you're like me, you grew up listening to these records, and you see this legend, and did you feel totally prepared, or was a little nervousness there? Just give us some insight on how that goes.
Yeah, so totally unprepared, but I was with Monty Alexander, and it was my dream to play with Duke Ellington, but Duke Ellington died while I was still going to school at IU. And so now I'm playing with Monty Alexander, Jeff Hamilton, absolutely loving it. But after 2 years, I was not looking to leave, but I just started thinking, God, I missed out on Duke Ellington. My other dream is to play with Count Basie. He's getting older. So I called Ray Brown, told him. He said, "Let me see what I can do." The next day, I was talking to Count Basie.
No way, that's
The
insane.
next day, I know. And so, we called him the chief, as you know. Chief called me and said, "Hello, young man, I hear you want to play in my band." I said, "Yes, sir, Mr. Basie, I'd love to." He said, "Well, I'll have my manager call you." He hung up, and Sonny Cohn, Cup, as we called him. Cup called me and said, I hear you want to play in the band. Our bass player is leaving in 2 weeks. Can you make it then? I said, absolutely. So I told Monty Alexander, I'm going to join Count Basie in 2 weeks, and he gave me his blessing. So there I am in New York, and I've
What hotel?
President Hotel, 48th Street, between just off 8th Street, 7th and 8th, or Broadway and 8th. Anyway, so there I am on the bus early, of course. Yes, you asked if I was scared. Are you kidding? I was shaking in my boots. It's
No
sort of like
rehearsal, of course, right?
no rehearsal. The concert was the rehearsal.
Right.
So I am in the bus, just pinching myself and just I can't believe I'm here, imagining what I have in store, and no idea. Anyway,
Did you pass Freddie Green on the way to the
actually
the back?
on the bus,
Yeah.
Freddie Green's seat was across from my seat.
Okay.
So in the same row on the other side of the bus, so he walks on, and I recognize him, of course. I said, "Hello, Mr. Green," introduced myself, and he just kind of went, "Hey." He was so, as you know, he was so quiet and so uncommunicative. And anyway, so he sits down, he crosses his leg, and he's looking out the window the way he would always do. And then Count Basie comes on, walks to the back. I introduce myself, tell him what a pleasure it is to be here, and he welcomes me. And then he starts talking to Freddie Green the way those guys would sometimes talk to each other. So Basie's looking up at the ceiling, Freddie's looking out the window. They're not looking at each other as they talk to each other. And then Basie says, "Yeah, you ever run into so-and-so played saxophone?" And Freddie Green said, "Oh, yeah, I saw him not too long ago. Oh, yeah." Basie said, "How's he sound?" Freddie Green said, "Oh, he sound okay. He's still playing a lot of notes." And Basie said, "Yep, dog shit fast, don't shit long." And I went, wow. So I wanted to write down all these words of wisdom. So that was the beginning. I think that the first gig we did was in Virginia or the DC area or something like that. And I just remember that Butch Miles, bless his heart, he told me, "I'll help you out." And I was standing, so I was situated at Count Basie's left hand. That way I could watch his left hand, and Butch was to my left. And I could look straight ahead and look at Basie, or I could look over my left shoulder and see Butch Miles, and Butch would look at me and give me signals like he'll have two fingers like two beat feel or whatever it was, or he might call out the numbers of the charts.
So I think the audience needs to know that Basie didn't introduce every tune. He would do a piano intro, and from that intro, you would get what the tune was.
That's exactly right. And so
if you're reading a book, then you're on your own.
You're on your own because he's playing, and you go, "I don't know what this is," and Butch Miles would go 57 or whatever it was, and then I'd find the thing. But often, I love Basie so much that a lot of the things I had memorized already because I'd played along with the recordings since I was a teenager, and the new arrangements I really did have to read, but it was just look at him, listen to Butch, and I was cool.
Was there? You told me a couple charts you liked. You liked Splanky.
Oh, Splanky.
Was that 139 or something? Something like that.
I don't even remember. That sounds right, but I only read it once or twice because I had that one memorized. So long before I was in the band, I had that one memorized.
I never got tired of playing 1 o'clock jump or jumping at the Woodside.
Oh,
and like jumping at the Woodside, it's like a riff chart, but I would get chills playing it because it was roars.
Yeah, that's right. That's one I loved. Both of those I loved. Shiny Stockings I loved. And then when we would do dances every now and then, he'd take out things that we normally wouldn't play for concerts. We'd play songs like For Lena and Lenny, which was written by Quincy Jones. And I love that. And I wanted to know how to do that, how to write like that. So I would actually, when the band was taking a break or before they started, I'd take out blank piece of score paper, and I would take out for Lena and Lenny and go to the first alto sax part and write out 8 bars. Go to the second alto, write out those same 8 bars, and put all of the parts from the individual musicians
Yeah.
on the score page, and then go back to my hotel room and study how Quincy Jones had acquired that sound. So, I mean, that plus the band, being so supportive and playing things for me before the gig, just so I could hear 8 bars of something. It was the best learning environment anybody could wish for.
That leads me to my first question about your arranging for that band. How did what was your first chart you handed out? Was it Blues for Stephanie or no?
No, it wasn't that. I can't remember what it was called, but it might have been something I was trying to write for Sonny Cohn
Okay.
to feature him. I had no idea what I was doing. I'd never really written for a big band before. I'd never studied it. I knew how to transpose for the instruments. That's kind of all. I had
Now,
some fantasies.
I hear that Frank Foster and Eric Dixon used to talk about that. If you pass out a new arrangement, you look at Basie as they're playing it, and you get through about 16 bars of it, and you saw him flip that music over. And you finish it. They say you'd finish it. He said, that was really good. And he said, what else you got? And that means that he didn't like it, So did he ever do that to you is my question.
First of all, that's true. He didn't do it to me.
Yeah.
But I saw him on a couple of occasions take that piece that we were playing, whatever it was, and turn his piano part over. He didn't do it to me, maybe because I was standing so close to him. But I do remember after playing something that I'd written, later on, he said to me, he said, hey, that thing you just wrote, it's got that bit in there with you and the trombones and everything. I'd written a solo for the trombones and bass. And I said, yeah. He said, okay, you might want to save that for your band.
Ooh.
And he wasn't being mean at all. He was just,
Yeah.
and I have to tell you, I had never, at that point, I'd never thought about starting a band.
Yeah.
He was a soothsayer. He really knew things about people, especially about me. I mean, he told me once that he said, I can look at somebody and tell if they can play or not.
Wow.
And at the time, I thought, yeah, right.
Yeah.
But the older I got, the more I started to understand what he was talking about.
Yeah.
There's something that an energy that people give when they have acquired knowledge and ability and, music and technique and all that stuff. It's inexplicable.
Yeah.
And he could look at people and tell if what their situation was. I think I may have told you a story about this man who had had too much to drink. We're playing a concert, and somehow this guy worked his way on stage, center stage, and from the audience. I think the stage was not very tall, so he came up on stage, and while we're playing the song, Count Basie looked up and saw this guy. That security guard came from backstage to get rid of this guy, not interrupt the concert, and Basie waved off the security guard. And this gentleman stumbled up to Basie. We're still playing a song.
Yeah.
Stumbled up to Count Basie and kind of leaned his weight on the piano and extended his hand. And Count Basie looked at him and gave him that Basie smile and shook his hand. And the guy walked off the stage.
Wow.
So how did he know that? I mean, try that with a band leader today. In the middle of a concert, some drunk walks on stage and it interrupts the concert and, get him out of here, will you please? That's usually but Basie knew that kind of stuff.
And he knew how to de-escalate. That's what they call it these days, de-escalate the situation.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
You have several friends that want to say hi, wanted me to say hi for them, and that's Pete Mills, the great Pete Mills.
Hello, Pete.
Trombonist Linda Landis.
Hey, Linda.
And then, see, Bob Breithaupt wants to say hi.
Hey, Robert.
And then Terry Dodds, who I don't know if you know, Dowds, I think it is, who he wants to say hello. He just a great,
Harry,
great player there in
thank you.
town. So everybody's loving you here online in our comments,
Oh, it's fun.
and our time is ticking by faster. I have so much to talk to you about. Can you quickly tell us a little bit? You mentioned that, so you're, by the way, I heard a similar story with Benny Carter and trying to learn how to arrange. There was no arranging classes or books or anything when he started, so he said he would take these marching band or concert band arrangements and say, "Oh, what is the clarinet doing there? What is the alto doing? What is the
Huh.
trombone?" And he would line them all up on the floor. Mark Vinci,
Wow.
great alto player, told me Benny told him this, and he just sort of see what everybody was doing and try to figure out how he could hip that up, and
Wow.
sort of copying and checking out ways people did things, and that was one of his examples. And then you're telling us that you learned so much from Quincy in that way. You then developed a relationship with Quincy, and to this day, if he's got something that needs a really great arrangement, he will often call you. Can you tell us about that relationship just real quickly?
That's sort of through the years has morphed. We have to go back to Ray Brown because when I was a teenager and had just finished the class with Ray Brown and was hanging around with Ray Brown. Ray Brown was a business partner with Quincy Jones. So Ray Brown introduced me to Quincy, and I got to go to some recording sessions, and they had movie dates and TV shows that they were doing at the time, and I got to see Quincy do his magic. And then Quincy eventually invited me to his house. And I was like, it was Prince and Pauper. Here's this pauper kid in this palace of Quincy Jones, when he was always so down to earth and cool and homey. Never had the feeling that here was this very well off, totally connected, world renowned guy. He never gave that vibe. And we would talk about in between his working on whatever he was working on, we would talk about things. And then eventually I finished school in Indiana, or, Indiana University on the road, blah, blah, and I just stayed in touch with him. And I remember when I moved to Holland, I came back to LA on a summer vacation break or something like that, and I called Quincy and said, "Hey Q, I'm in town." He said, "Oh, good. How you doing, little brother?" He said, "I'd love to see you. Can you come by?" And he said, "I'm working on finishing up some mixing on a Michael Jackson record. Why don't you come by?" So I went to the studio, and I rang the buzzer, and I could see him at the recording desk working with the engineer, and there was someone else sitting next to him. And before I walked in the door, I saw him lean over to the person that was next to him and say something, and they nodded their heads, and then that person relinquished their chair. I sat next to Quincy. He hugged me. "How are you doing?" And we just talked, and he caught up. And when he got me, he said, I'm sorry, when he got me before sitting in the chair, he said, "Come on over here. There's somebody I want you to meet." And he introduced me to whoever it was in the room, and we started talking, hanging out. The doorbell rings to the studio again, and Quincy looks at the door and he sees who's there, and he said to me, "Don't go away. There's somebody I want you to meet."
Mm-hmm.
And I learned about this from him, sincere way of making everybody in the room feel good. So that person that was sitting talking to him before me feels good. I walk in, he makes me feel good. He still makes me feel good, even though he's going to have to, give some attention to this other person. So, that was that part of Quincy. There's a lot of lessons like that from Quincy as a person and as an artist dealing with other artists that I learned.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, by that time, I was sharing whatever tunes or arrangements I'd written with him to get his input or just to allow him to hear what I was doing. So eventually he started saying, "Hey, can you do this for me?" And that just kind of grew and grew. And nowadays we talk about music. One of the things I have to remind him of is that, and I'm fingers crossed that we can make it happen. He's so busy. We had a dinner at his house once with Benny Carter and Benny's wife and my wife and Quincy and his lady friend at the time, and we just had a wonderful meal. We were talking about music, about composing, arranging, etc. And I said, wouldn't it be fun to work on a piece together? You know, all of us write a movement, if you will, to this joint work. And both of them said, that's a great idea. That would be fun. So Benny Carter did his.
No way.
Yes. And then he, you know, as we all know, he passed away. And Quincy and I have yet to do ours, to put this piece together that over the dinner table we agreed that we would do. So that's the unfinished business that I still want to get to with Quincy Jones.
Yeah, that was Benny's challenge to you guys by finishing it first.
You dig? The oldest guy,
Yeah.
taking care of business the first.
Yeah,
I mean, that was
cool.
yeah. So Quincy is a, you know, he's, there are no words. I would go to his house. Some of you may have seen this movie about Quincy Jones.
There's a
It's
new
on,
one that's on Netflix. Is that
on
the one?
Netflix, yeah. And you'll see a spot in there of Gerald playing piano and I'm playing
Yes.
bass at Quincy's. And that came about because one day when Gerald was in high school, I said, what do you think about doing some caroling? And he said, sure. I said, no, you're just going to play piano. I'll play bass. But what we'll do is, I just called up a bunch of people that I knew, and I knew they had pianos. So I called my classical teacher. I called a gentleman named David Abel here in Los Angeles. I called Benny Carter. I called Ray Brown. I said, and Quincy Jones. And we got in the car, and I let them know, hey, I'm coming over. I didn't tell them what was up. I'll see you in a few. And we drove to Benny Carter's. I took out my bass. We walked in the house. We played some Christmas carols. Back in the car, drive to Ray Brown. Same thing. Drive to Quincy Jones. Same thing. The only person that's alive from that group is Quincy Jones.
Wow.
So until recently, Gerald and I, even though he's in his 30s and I'm in my blues, we still do that. So what that from the movie, what you're seeing is that moment at Quincy Jones's, and it started out with just us playing for Quincy, and then little by little he said, "Would you mind if I invited some people?"
Yeah.
But Quincy Jones remains a really big, important piece of my life. I love him. He has a nickname for everybody.
Yeah.
And his nickname for me is DD's because I once told him, Quincy, I love your dirty drawers. And he said, I love your dirty drawers. And he said, and I'm older, so therefore you are DD's. And I said, okay, I'll be DD's number 2. You could be DD's number 1. So that's his nickname.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for sharing those. Those are amazing stories. Yeah. I've heard these stories over dinner, but I think it's important to get to hear these. One of my all-time favorite recordings, and it happens to be one that you wrote all the music, all the arrangements for, is with you, and I think it's a WDR band with Carmen McRae. We don't have a lot of time, but let everybody know who plays drums on that and how amazing that is. And can you say just a few words about working with the great Carmen McRae?
Oh, sure. The drummer on that is the former teacher of Jeff Hamilton's, and that's John Von Olin. John Von Olin lived in Indiana, worked a lot in Indiana, and lived, I think he lived on the border of Indiana, Ohio. Anyway, John Von Olin we had this wonderful, loose, beautiful way of playing. When Jeff Hamilton and I first met, Jeff was more influenced by people like Buddy Rich. Gene Krupa was his first love, Louis Bellson. And he loved other people too, but those people really had a big influence on him. John Von Olin, when he hooked up with John Von Olin basically helped Jeff Hamilton really to loosen up and throw his chops out the window and really feel the music and play the music in a different way. So John Von Olin played music on that recording because Jeff Hamilton wasn't available.
And John tore it up. That's some of my favorite drumming.
Yeah, absolutely. He totally tore it up. And you can hear, if you listen to that, you can understand where Jeff Hamilton came from.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that was one thing. Carmen McRae, she was I played in her small group as well, so I have gazillions of Carmen McRae stories. But one quick one, I remember being in her band, and she somebody from the audience said, "Hey, Carmen, why don't you sing Tie a Yellow Ribbon or whatever?" And she just said, "Honey, I only sing songs about love." And
Beautiful.
that just hit me between the eyes, you know. And so if it's not a kind of a joke piece or whatever, it's always about love with her. And she is the one, she's the first one that forced me to listen to the meaning of a lyric. When
Hmm.
she said, "Someday he'll come along, the man I love, and he'll be big and strong." You know, you felt big.
Yeah.
You know, so God bless her for that.
Yeah. Wow. Fantastic. Um, I want to talk about one other person, then I got a little video I want to play. Um, I started hearing about this young lady from you, and then I'm told that you and Jeff Hamilton really nurtured her career. And I'm talking about Diana Krall. And you've done records with her and things like that. You've also played in her group a lot. Can you speak a little bit about her?
Oh yeah, she remains a very very close friend, and she came to Los Angeles from Vancouver to study with Jeff Hamilton and me and Alan Broadbent and Jimmy Rolls
Hmm.
when she was 19 years old. And Gerald and Gina always roll their eyes when I mentioned that she used to babysit them. So she babysat our kids, but she was here to study jazz piano playing and trio piano playing, especially. We worked on that with her, Jeff Hamilton and me. We'd have sessions at his house. Uh, she did a remarkable job, and we really didn't even know that she sang. She got some local gigs around L.A., and she would be doing solo piano and singing some tunes and all that sort of thing. But she really wanted to focus on her piano playing when she lived here. Uh, and then one thing led to the other, and the rest is history, as they like to say. She just took off, and we reminded her that you get to do this. You know, never forget that this is a blessing that you're allowed to do. And that's the kind of humility you have to have and respect for the musicians and the music. The music, I always say, music is bigger than we are because it's going to be around long after we're gone, but we are more important than the music because we're human beings.
Hmm.
And so we talked about her about all kinds of things, trio piano playing, how to give signals and cues and all that stuff. And she's doing fabulously. She's got two beautiful twin boys that I adore, and her husband is amazing. She had to, you know, sometimes you had to kiss a bunch of frogs till you get to the prince. So it was kind of painful to see her go through that frog period, but she got a prince.
Oh, that's
You know, Elvis
fantastic.
Costello is really a wonderful person.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I wanted to play something, and if Alexa could get it queued up. You did something, oh, geez. Oh, that, when everybody heard that, and I mean everybody, because they put out a single of that, and that's your arrangement. When they played that, um, everybody went crazy. I got chills. I heard, I don't watch, that was at the Super Bowl. The soloist was Whitney Houston. Um, I think the country was going through the Gulf War, was it at the time? And
Yes.
so I just wanted to thank you for that, if nobody has, because I think that something like that, and it'll happen after the virus, and you'll probably be the person to do something for us then. But I think you helped bring the country together with that musical arrangement that you did. It
Mm,
was so special, and it just always moves me. Um, what you did there was simply spectacular, and I just wanted to thank you for the world for
mm.
giving that gift to us. It's,
Thank you.
you know,
Thank you. That was, you know, obviously it's a team effort. You know, it takes the spirit and musicality of somebody like Whitney Houston to deliver what she delivered,
yeah.
and her voice and her work before that was in my ear and an inspiration for me and a guiding set of guiding directions for me in terms of how I wanted to approach it. And, you know, thinking about what the country was going through. at that time with the Gulf War, and everybody's patriotism was really high, and troops were fighting and dying, and it's ugly stuff. So you think about people like me, or a lot of my favorite arrangers think about that sort of thing when you write. You think about actually, I write out a sketch in words before I write the
No
music.
way. Huh.
Yeah. So I start out with Roman numeral one, and I think about what the what the song is trying to portray. So the first part of the song might be whatever, 8 bars, and I think, should this be exciting? Should it be somber? Should it be introverted? Should it be sad? Should it be celebratory? Should I just kind of write all of these things out in words, and then I get to the actual writing of the notes of the music and write out again Roman numeral one, section one. How should that be? Section two. Okay, let's make that more thoughtful, more inside, more introverted, like I said, maybe sad, melancholy. And I just come up with, and then how does that translate to the instruments that I use, to the range that the instruments are playing in, all that sort of thing. And Roman numeral three might say, okay, this is the last part. It, rockets, red glare. How can I help people feel rockets, and etc. So that's kind of the way I work, and a lot of other arrangers do too, I'm sure. And
Well,
once I'm armed with that,
quick question
yeah,
on
I
that
can
one.
go.
So typically this is in 3/4, and I think yours was 4/4.
Yeah, you know what? There were the person who, I forgot to mention this, which is really important. Her music director at the time was a guy named Ricky Minor, whose name a lot of people have
Yeah.
recognized through, a lot of things he's done, Emmy Awards, whatever, all this stuff. So Ricky Minor called me and said, "We'd like you to do your thing on the Star Spangled Banner with Whitney, for Whitney and a symphony orchestra." He said, "Do whatever you do." And he said, "My only couple of requests. Number one, would you mind doing it in 4/4, which Marvin Gaye had done and some of the people had done." And I said, "No, that's cool. I can do this." The other thing is, if you can kind of set up some kind of a groove in the orchestra. We're not going to have a drum set. We're
Yeah.
not going to have electric bass, but so therefore, that's why I kind of set up a quasi groove in the percussion section the way they did. And I was just thinking the other day, your mind kind of gets dusty, but I think that Ricky Minor was also the one who suggested to me to go to do the last 3 chords that I used.
Boom, boom, boom.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that's all. The rest of it was, John, please do whatever you want.
Yeah.
So the 4/4 thing was what they had requested.
Wow. Great stuff. We have limited time now. I can't believe how fast it's gone by. I have a couple, or at least one more thing for you. With all that you've done, you were one of the great players on the planet. That's Bob Bright Hop's quote, and it's true.
Thank you.
And one of the great composers, conductors, arrangers, and all that. But in my gut, I also, almost at the top, I see you're teaching. It's not a throwaway for you, like it can be for some guys. And I know that because wherever you are, if you happen to walk by a room with kids playing in there, students playing there, you'll say, "Hey, let's go say hi to the kids," and you'll spend 15 minutes. Or if a bass player or any instrument comes up, you say, "Mr. Clayton, just wanted to meet you." And then you ask them about themselves, and you say, "Well, tell me what you play, what are you working on, who you're listening to," and all those things. And I think after we're all, gone, I think there's a great picture of you talking to the students at the Ohio State University there, and you can see Benny Green's there and Jeff on drums, and they are enamored of you and all those guys. But I think that your legacy will in large part, and this is a great thing, it will be you as a teacher, but as a compassionate, loving teacher. You have been that for me, and I want you to know that. And it's more than just telling me what to do. You lead by your example, and I've seen you do it with your own big band. It's like everybody has an amazing respect for you, and I think that you treat them like so much like human beings, and there's a love there that from you as a leader, you'll do things like I remember Clay Jenkins gave you a recording of one of his albums, and the next couple days you wrote an arrangement of one of the songs in there, which always blew Clay away, you know. But that's what, you know, and you've done the same for me. You'll be like, hey, man, check out this thing. You just rewrote a thing this January for me on Sunny Side of the Street.
Right.
You did for me like, you know, 10, 15 years ago for the Hollywood Bowl. Can Final thing I'll say about your teaching is I taught for you one time in Washington State at what's that called?
Fort Townsend Jazz.
Fort Townsend, and you had a big meeting with the teachers because you were really clear about how you wanted things done. You wanted your teaching thing run a certain way, and there was a real high level. And before you left, uh, you excused us to go teach, you said, "Oh, and by the way, no music. Teach everybody by ear. Bye." And I'm not going to violate John Clayton, you know. And I think was going to teach like Sweet Georgia Brown and Oleo or something like that. And I had to like walk to my studio where I'm teaching and then to rethink how I'm going to teach everybody by ear. You were really close. I don't want to see no music anyway, you know. So quickly, before we run out of time, tell me about your philosophy of teaching and what teaching means to you.
It's this whole idea of, I mentioned before, it's this whole idea of really examining yourself and understanding what feels good to you vis-a-vis your upbringing. And whatever it was that worked for you, that really inspired you, that helped you to come to your instrument and come to music every day, that needs to be in some form or fashion the same idea that you pass on to someone else. For instance, Ray Brown, and the reason I say that is because we musicians are so humble that we don't look at ourselves in the way that we grew as important methods of learning. Ray Brown, I said, how did you learn it? There were no play along records and jazz departments and all that. How'd you? And he just poo-pooed it. He said, "Oh man, I just learned Slam Stewart and Jimmy Blanton and Oscar Pettiford solos when I was younger. You know, I just memorized those things, and so much so that they called me Slam Pettiford." And so, but he would always say to me, "But here's what you got to do." And of course, I did those things, and they were important things. But I also looked at, wait a minute, you did this, and even though he poo-pooed it, that I understand now that those were essential things that that helped inform who he became. So I just wanted, you know, looking at that, I try to encourage all of my musician friends and teachers, look at yourself and the things that inspired you that you did, and allow, if you really understand how they could help someone else, offer those things to the students in addition to the things that you realize you never got that you now see are very important. So it's giving back, but it's giving back in a deeper way, because we have to examine ourselves and what music means to us and what learning means to us, and then using those tools. For instance, the way I band lead, the way I work one-on-one with students really reflects the lessons that I've learned, that both types of lessons that I've learned. The one that felt really bad when the band leader would swing around and curse me out and make me feel really small and unimportant. And then a different band leader swinging around with a big smile on his or her face and just thumbs upping me, and you know, and realizing how that made me feel. And then trying to figure out, I learned from both situations what way felt best and how did I learn the most, the quickest.
Yeah.
Things like that. Those are just kind of the tools that I use, and I use them by examining other people and how they taught.
Well, John, we have run out of time. It went by too fast. I hope that you will agree to come back and join us another time.
Anytime. This is fun.
You are full of infinite wisdom, and I just want you to know you have taught me throughout my life. You've taught me how to be a better man. You've taught me how to treat people. You've taught me musically, and you have ways of telling me things like that I really suck. You have a way of telling me.
You've never sucked. I haven't heard that, Byron.
you have you have a way. No, you have a way of saying maybe you don't want to do that. You have a unique way of relaying information, which is very, we call it a great bedside manner. And your legacy continues, but it already is etched in history because of the person that you are and the musician that you are. And every time you come into a room, that room lights up, and everybody's a little bit better. In fact, you are the light, and indeed the light in the darkness. And
Oh,
as
thank
I
you.
say, you're almost like, very much like I felt Thad Jones. You're a natural leader. And when you show up, everything gets better. And I think that's a good quality of a leader. So I
Thank
just want to thank you for being John Clayton. And I want the world to know who and what you are. And I especially want them to hear your music. And I can't wait for the next time that we're on stage together.
Likewise. Thank you, Byron. You mean so much to me and all the people you associate yourselves with. You always uplift me, and I thank you for that.
Oh, well, thank you. We will look forward to seeing. Remember, Jeff Hamilton is next week. I want everybody to see your buddy Jeff, and we'll
Yes.
talk about you guys' band then because we didn't have time today. But until then, ladies and gentlemen, we thank you so much for the great John Clayton. We remind you to join us next week. Go Thursday on Facebook. You'll see Zach Compston. He always has an off stage on Thursdays. Join him. Go to jazzemergencyfund.com to donate to us to help these programs and all our other programs continue to exist. Thank you again, John Clayton, and we love everybody. We'll see you next time.